Okay, this next little task that we're going to do is demonstrating how to use the web client object within C# or within Visual Studio to actually access information on a website or from a website. You can use the web client to download files or to get text from web pages. So you'll know from when we were doing internet and website development that web pages are made up of HTML. Most or many websites also have what's called an API, and an API allows you to access the information on that website and use that in another application. And so you can use the web client, which is built into .NET and C# in order to be able to download the information from those APIs or to access the website. It's called scraping a web page, and what you can do is scrape the data off the web page and then use it in your own application within C#. So I'm going to demonstrate how to do that. So the first thing we're going to need to do is create a new project. So let's go to File and choose New Project. And we're going to, for today's exercise, use a Forms app. And what we're going to do is get the HTML from a web page and then put that onto our form. Now you remember the HTML is code, so you would have to do a couple of extra steps if you actually wanted to use this for your assignment. You'd have to use some string functions to be able to find data within the website and then make changes on your form. But for this, we're just going to get the data and put it on the form. So let's call it, instead of Windows Forms App 2, let's call it Get Web Page to show what it is we're doing. So our solution is a Windows Forms app, and we're going to call it Get Web Page, and then say OK, so it creates your application for you. Now we need somewhere to put the data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my common controls and I'm going to find a text box and I'm going to put a text box onto my form. Now that's quite small at the moment, and you'll see by default with a text box you can drag it to the left, but you can't make it multi-line. There is, however, a property over here which is called multi-line, and so you can see that when you find the multi-line property you can change that to true, and your handles on your text box now change so that you can actually resize that vertical as well. And so what we're going to do is have a nice big text box here on our form, and we're going to fill that with the HTML from our website. Now it's always sensible to give this a more sensible name rather than called rather than being called textbox1. It's better to be called something that means something. So I'm going to just call it txt web code, because that's where I'm going to put the code from the web. Now you could also link this to a button, but I'm going to show you another new function today, which is the FormLoad function. So when you double click on your form, you'll see that it takes you into a method which is called form1load. Now what happens in this procedure, or this procedure happens whenever the form loads straight away. So this is stuff that happens when your program starts or when your form first loads. And so I'm going to put the code to access the website and download the code into there. You'll also see up the top we've got our namespaces that we're currently using. So namespaces are collections of classes, they're collections of methods that you can currently use, and so these are the ones that we're currently able to use in our code. I'll show you down here. I'll start using the web client code, and you'll see at the moment it's not coming up as available for me. Okay, there's no object called a web client. So in order to access the web client, the first thing you're going to need to do is come up to the namespaces declarations up the top here, and just press enter after using Windows Forms, and we're going to say using, and we're going to add a namespace called system.net, and there it is. And so that's now going to give me access to the namespace system.net, and the web client is a part of that. And so now you'll see that that's turned green because it understands what that code is. Okay, now I'm going to create my client, or the thing that's going to actually download the web code. I'm just going to call it client, so web client called client, and it's simply equal to a new web client, and finish. So we've now got our thing that's going to download the web pages for us, and so this is like a browser that we can use, but it's a browser we're using within our application. So we've now got that client set up. Now we're going to use that client and we're going to put our data into a string. So you'll remember the HTML code is text, so text is a string, and let's call it string str page code, because let's put a capital on P. I like my camel case, so I've started it with str because it's going to be a string and I need to remember that later on, and it's going to become equal to, so the string page code is going to be equal to the data that the client can download. So we're going to say client dot, and then you'll see when you go to D for download, there's a whole lot of different things you can download. We want to download the code from the web page as a string of data so that we can actually use that string in our form. You'll see up here there's options to download files. So if you actually knew the location of a file on a website, you could download that and it would save it into your program application directory for you. So that would actually download an entire file and save it somewhere. But that's no good if you then can't use it in your program. So we want to get the web page, but we're going to put the contents of the web page into a variable which we can then use somewhere else. So let's say we want to download our page as a string, and then you can simply say the URL inside quotes of what you want to download. So I'm going to get our school portal. So you can say, and you make sure you get your URL correct. So it's http://wccs.school. And so that's now going to download a copy of the school portal, and you've got to obviously finish each line with a semicolon, and put that into a string variable. Now we can use that string variable somewhere else on the form. So you'll remember we've got a text box. It's called text web code. So there it is. And we want the text in that text box to become equal to the string page code. So we've set up a client, that first line there. We've downloaded the information from this website and put it into a variable called string page code, and then we've taken that variable string page code and put it into a text text box, and that's all happening when the form loads. So when we press play, the text should be there in the text box ready to go. So let's have a look and see how it goes. Press start, it'll create our form for us, and it's appeared on my other monitor, but there it is for you. So there's form number 1, and you can see there's the HTML that makes up our website for the WCCS student portal. And so that's got that content and put it into this text box. Now if you were using this for your assessment task, what we want you to do is download content from a website, but then read that content using the string functions available in C# and make a decision based on that. So one little tip for that, you can give this program a go as it stands. So stop the video at this point and try that first of all, make sure that you can download it, and then you can restart me, and I'm going to show you an example API that you could use this with. Okay, so pause here, have a go, make sure you can download that, and then restart me in a couple of minutes. Okay, so hopefully you've now restarted me, and what I'm doing is I'm showing you this website in a browser. Let's just minimize C#. So here's my browser, and I'm using a website called Open Weather Map, and Open Weather Map has an API. That means it's an application program interface, which means that other applications can use the data that's on the Open Weather Map site and put it into their programs, or put it into their application. And so you can see up here that you need to create an account in order to access the API, and when you create an account you get access to this section here, which shows you how you can get the information from this website. So you can see down here there's an example. If you go to api.openweathermap.org/data/2.5/weather equals $Q equals, and then replace this variable here, city name, with an actual city, then it will give you the information about the weather that's in that city at the moment. So you can see here's an example, so the weather currently in London. So if I click on that link, then what it's going to do is it's going to give me a page, you can see it's just simple text, that tells me all about the weather in London. So here's the latitude and the longitude, and the weather description currently says drizzle. It's a light intensity drizzle, and as we read along you can see the temperature 280.32. Now if you read the API, it tells you that that measurement is in kelvins. You can convert them using different calls to metric versions, so in Celsius, or you can also use Fahrenheit. It has the pressure, the humidity, the minimum temperature and the maximum temperature, and so on. And so this is the information that I would then want to use in my application, put in a simple text form. And so the API means that I could call this and then just pass through this string. This string is in a format which is called JSON, JSON, and you can have a look at how to pass JSON text using C#, and you could break this down into a whole lot of variables that you can then use in your application. So here's an API call that I've created for Sydney. You can see at the moment the weather. I've changed the tab here to the tab I'd created earlier. This is the weather in Sydney. I've said I want the units in metric, and then I've put in my API ID as well. You get about 60 queries per minute, I think it is, for free using this API, and if you want more, then you can go here to price. So if you were actually creating a weather app that was going to be used by multiple people across the world, then you'd probably need, there you go. So this is 60 per minute for free. You can get 600 calls per minute for $40 a month. And so if you were an app developer who was using this on the iTunes Store or the Play Store, then you'd probably have to actually pay for extra calls because all of the people across the world who download your application are going to be making more calls per minute than the free version would allow you. And so if you sold a couple of million copies, you might need to go with 200,000 calls per minute to be able to use this. And that would cost you $2,000 a month. But if you've sold 1 million, then hopefully you can afford $2,000 per month to do that. All right, so let's go back to our sample. So this is the string that I've got. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply select all by triple clicking. Oh, got it, there we go. I'm going to copy that URL, and then I'm going to bring C# back up, and instead of getting WCCS school, I'm going to simply paste my API call in, and you can see there's my unique ID. Now if you would like to, you can use my unique ID right there. We've got 60 calls a minute, so long as we don't all sit there spamming and refreshing our applications over and over and over again, we shouldn't have any problems. So you can have a go at using this same URL if you like. But when I now run my application, instead of getting the information from the school portal, I'm now going to get the information from this API. So let's press start. It runs, and once again it's opened on my other monitor, so there it is. And so you can see here's the current weather in, there it is, 12.54, the current weather in Sydney. And so this application has now downloaded that. Now if you use some JSON parsing functions, then what you would be able to do is break that down, and instead of just showing it all here in a single text box, you could actually say, okay, 12.54 is the temperature, I want to display that numerically on my form. It currently says that the weather is clouds, and so you could display that graphically on your form and show a picture of some clouds on your form. So you'd have to break this string down into something that can be used by your application. Okay, so you can give that a go. I'll just jump back to the API that I'm using here. So you can see some of the different things you can do. You can search for the weather in a city and a country, and as you scroll down you can find particular city IDs. You can use graphic coordinates, so that's longitude and latitude coordinates. You can search by zip codes, and if I scroll back up to the menu down the right hand side, you can see that you can get it in different formats, and you can also start to do things where you can change the format, the units that you use, and so on. So you'll see in my API, I've said I want the weather from Sydney, but I want the units to be metric, and so that way it's actually put the units here in degrees Celsius instead of using Kelvin. All right, so you can have a look at that API, the openweathermap.org site, if you want to customize the API, but there's all sorts of different APIs out there. So if you wanted to get information from Facebook, then what you would do is have to research the Facebook API, and that would show you how to actually get information from Facebook. If you wanted to get data from Twitter, you would have to research the Twitter API, and that would then show you how to get information out of Twitter to use in your application. Now remember that at school some of these sites are going to be blocked, so you'd need to think through what you actually have access to here at school, because they'll also be blocked from your application if they're not available to you through your browser. So have a look, see what you can access, choose a website that you can access the API of, and then try and create that structure, that URL structure, so that you can actually get the information you would like to use in your app.